Hey folks, I'm best-selling author of The Power's Year, David McKnight. In today's video, you'll see part 4 of my conversation with CPAs Greg O'Brien and John Malone, in which we dig into the questions, what is an L.I.R.P. and why is it tax-free?
Talk to us more about the concept. I know you use the concept of a L.I.R.P. or life insurance retirement plan. This is one that's, I think, can be very, very confusing for people, but I've heard you explain it in some pretty interesting ways. So explain to us what bucket that's in and where this comes into someone's portfolio.
So the life insurance retirement plan, that's another name for cash value life insurance. And I'm not a big fan of a lot of what we see on TikTok and Instagram and elsewhere, where people talk about this as a silver bullet or one size fits all, panacea. It's going to solve all your financial problems. It only really works, in my estimation, when used in concert with all of these other tax-free streams of income, the 401, the Roth 401k, the Roth IRA, so on and so forth. But there's a couple of different scenarios where it might be useful. Number one, basically, it's when it comes to life insurance, what most people do is they get as little death benefit as the IRS requires of you, and they stuff as much money. They get as much death benefit as they can get for as little money as possible. That's term insurance. With cash value life insurance, you're doing just the opposite. You're getting as little death benefit as the IRS requires of you, and you're stuffing as much money into it as the IRS allows in an attempt to sort of mimic all of the tax-free benefits of the Roth IRA without any of the limitations of the Roth IRA. I'm not saying it is a Roth IRA. I'm saying that when you structure it properly, it can grow in a tax-free way, but without the limitations you might see in traditional tax-free investments. So, and that money is growing safely and productively. We're talking between, I generally tell people between 5 and 7% net of fees over time. And you know what? If you can get 5 to 7% net of fees over time, with a guarantee against loss, without taking any more market risk than what you're accustomed to taking in your savings account, that's a pretty safe and productive way to grow at least a portion of your money. And you got to remember, it is a life insurance policy, so there's a death benefit attached to it. And the thing that a lot of people over age 50 I've seen that they really like about the L.I.R.P. is that it allows you, if you get it with the right company, you can receive your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. And should you die peaceful in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed long-term care, someone's still getting a death benefit, probably your kids or your grandkids. So it can be a very sort of nimble, dynamic tool that can be used in concert with all of these other tax-free streams of income to do some unique things that maybe those other streams of income can't really accomplish.
And David, accessing, like in the L.I.R.P. setting, not the death benefit, but accessing the cash value, is that still an option? And is that in the form of a loan, or is there a different kind of method to doing so?
Yeah, so anything you've contributed, you can withdraw tax-free because that's just your basis, right? You've already paid tax on it. But anything above and beyond your basis, you would take out by way of a loan. And if you get it with the right company, it can be basically what we call a wash loan or a guaranteed 0% loan. Basically what they do is they say, okay, you go to the company, you say, look, I'd like to take a loan. And they say, okay, we'll give you a loan, but it's going to be coming from our own coffers. And so they give you a loan and they maybe charge you 3%. And then what they do is they'll take 3% out of your cash value and put it in what I call a loan collateral account, or sorry, not the 3%. They'll take the amount equivalent to whatever they loaned you out of your cash value, put in what's called a loan collateral account, and then they'll credit you an amount in that loan collateral account. And the companies that I like will, whatever they're charging you, say 3%, is what they're crediting back to you in that loan collateral account, which is, say, 3%. And as long as those two numbers are guaranteed, the net cost to you, the borrower, is always going to be 0%. So all you know is that you asked for $3,000, you asked for, say, $100,000, you got $100,000, your cash value went down by $100,000, and you didn't have to pay tax. So it feels like a tax-free distribution from a Roth IRA, even though there's some different moving parts that are happening behind the scenes.
The mechanics are a bit different. And then you said a couple of times companies that you like. So like, are those like mutual insurance companies? Like, what are you looking for there?
Not always. Usually mutual insurance companies are doing what's called whole life. I'm typically recommending something called indexed universal life. And the reason I'm recommending indexed universal life is because I think you're going to get higher rates of return than you would with whole life. And whole life, it does not offer you those guaranteed 0% loans that you can get with the index universal life. I think that's one of the single most important provisions in the entire contract is how you access the money. A lot of whole life plans, and I'm not saying there's not a place for whole life. But with a lot of whole life plans, there is a net cost to borrow. It might be 2%, might be 3%, what have you. And that interest can build and compound over time. I'm looking for something where it's a tax-free distribution, but it's also a cost-free distribution. And that's the only way I would ever go into that type of arrangement with a life insurance company.
Gotcha. Okay. And the distinction between accessing your cash value and accessing the death benefit is you're accessing the death benefit for that kind of narrow purpose of long-term care, correct?
Right. So if you can no longer perform 2 of 6 activities of daily living, and you can find one doctor to write one letter to that effect, they will start giving you your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. What we previously had been talking about is accessing your cash value, not your death benefit, your cash value for the purpose of paying for living expenses or what have you during your lifetime. So that's one of the living benefits of cash value life insurance.
Right. Interesting. So I didn't know that. So is that particular to these type of index universal life policies where you can use that kind of health, I'm not going to call it a loophole, but a health exclusion there to get money out? Or does that same term exist within whole life insurance as well?
Yep. No, there's most whole life companies these days allow you to do that as well.
That's very interesting. So on one hand, right, you have you're depositing money into these accounts. If you need money along the way, right, you can do these policy loans, these 0% loans, you call them, and then long-term cash the death benefit's grown, and you're like, hey, now I have a ton of living expenses as I get older for health and maybe nursing homes and things like that. Then you can then start taking that death benefit out 100% tax-free. Is that all correct?
That's true. Yep, that's exactly right. Well put.
Very, very interesting. That's you learn a lot of new stuff here. So,
the distinction here is that, if you read the Wall Street Journal, they're talking about how most people, the traditional long-term care policies are completely done. Nobody's getting those anymore because of the heartburn that goes along with this use it or lose it proposition, right? You pay for your long-term care for 30 years, die peaceful in your sleep, never having used it. They're not going to send you all your money back at the end. Conversely, with these hybrid policies where it's basically a life insurance policy, if you die peaceful in your sleep, never having needed long-term care, your kids or your grandkids are still getting a big pile of money. So there isn't that sensation of having paid for something you hope you never have to use. So that's why when it comes to paying for long-term care, at least mitigating long-term care, people are using this approach much more than they were the traditional long-term care insurance approach.
Yep, that totally makes sense. And I think you said in the IUL policies, net of fees, you're looking at like 5 to 7% rate of return. I think that's where some people get hung up too, is just like, what are the fees in these insurance policies? And so like, is there, are you able to kind of just like touch on those and like how they're structured? I know that there's a lot more than meets the eye, but in a kind of rudimentary fashion, I think that would be great.
Yeah. So these policies are front end loaded. Most of the expenses you experience in the first 10 to 15 years. So the way I describe it is as follows. The fees are higher in the early years, but they're a lot lower in the later years. But when you average it out over the life of the program, it should cost you about 0.5% of your cash value per year. So part of what happens is people fixate on the fees of the policy in the early years, which is a mistake, because the only way it makes sense to have one of these policies is if you keep it your entire life, which for most people is going to be anywhere from a 30 to a 50-year proposition. So why fixate on the fees for something in the first 10 years? Why make your decision on a 50-year proposition based on what's going on in the first 10 years? You should be making your decision based on what the average fees per year are over the life of the program. And I've seen some of these policies, when structured properly, that you get to the 30th year and the average internal expense per year is something on the order of 25 basis points. And that's comparable to a Vanguard index fund. These are really, really cost effective if you plan on keeping it your entire life. And I make the case that you shouldn't start one of these things. It's like getting married. Don't start it unless you're planning on keeping it till death do you part, right?
Makes sense. I think we've always told people, David, when they're getting into any type of life insurance, right, there's no get rich quick of life insurance, right? You're not hitting any home run. It's a very, very long, very, very long-term play. And I think frankly, it's pretty boring, right? When you get down to it. But as you explain it here, that does make sense to me that, fees are front loaded, but you got to look at it over that 30, 50, 60, whatever that time frame may be. So like if you're, I guess, like where do you start with someone, like, if you're a business owner in their 30s and their 40s, mostly speaking, right? Life insurance of any type is like the last thing on their radar. Like, where do you start with somebody even having that conversation?
Well, there's a very specific utilization of life insurance that I think is very, very compelling. And it's something that was highlighted in a recent study by Ernst & Young. Basically, you can utilize life insurance as what we call a volatility buffer in retirement. And I'll explain briefly how that works. So we've all heard of the 4% rule. You get $1 million by day one of retirement. The most you can take out is 4% per year. Why? Because you're going to have wide swings in the rates of return in that portfolio over time. And so 4%, they've done all the back testing in Monte Carlos. 4% is the amount that you can take out and maintain a high likelihood that your money is not going to run out of, you're not going to run out of money before you run out of life, right? So the question is, why is that 4% rule the 4%? Why isn't it 8%? Well, it's because if you experience a negative 30 in a given year and you were taking 8%, then that could cause your portfolio to go into a death spiral from which it never recovers. And this is what we call sequence of return risk. Dave Ramsey was in the news recently because he refused to acknowledge that sequence of return risk even exists. Okay. So the strategy that Ernst & Young outlined in their study was they basically said, if you're a young guy or gal and you save 30% of your retirement contribution, so whatever would let's say you're planning on saving $50,000 per year towards retirement, take 30% of that, or 15,000, put it into a life insurance policy. By the time you retire, if you can accumulate at least 3 years worth of living expenses in that life insurance policy by day one of retirement, and then live out of your life insurance in the year following a down year in the stock market, that will give your stock market portfolio a chance to recover before you take further distributions. And that act alone will double your sustainable withdrawal rate on that stock portfolio in retirement to as high as 8%. So if I were sort of trying to understand how to utilize life insurance in a mathematically corroborated way that's going to improve my financial outlook in retirement, I would say earmark 30% of your retirement savings for a cash value life insurance. I would recommend an index universal life policy, and put the remaining 70% into your Roth 401k or 401k, depending on what your tax bracket is today. Get the match. You can't forego the match. And then by the time you retire, in the first 10 years, it's really critical the first 10 years, but live out of your cash value life insurance in the years following a down year in the market, and then live out of your stock market portfolio all the other years. And if you do, you will dramatically increase, according to the Ernst & Young study and according to my own findings, I've got calculators I built to analyze this, you will be able to take much higher distributions. You'll be able to wring more efficiency out of your stock portfolio if you follow that course.
That's very interesting. So tangible example here. So you're saying, rewind a couple of years here when the market went way down at the beginning of COVID, everything crashed. So you would have recommended in that case, if someone is new to retirement there, that as that stock value dipped in their account, to have lived off of the life insurance in that year, wait till the market came back in 2022, and then return to normal?
That's exactly right. Yep. So live out of it following the down year in the stock market, because what does the stock market do typically in the year after it goes down? It comes back with a vengeance, right?
Yep.
If it keeps going down, if it goes down another year, like we saw, around the 2001, then live another year out of your life insurance and give the stock market a chance to recover. So it's, I've looked at this, I've analyzed this 100 different ways. The only vehicle, the only tool that allows you to accumulate that money in a tax-free way, that allows you to have it in place by day one of retirement, is the cash value life insurance. It allows you to build that money up slowly over time and then access it immediately upon retirement should you happen to retire in a bear market. Okay, folks, that was part 4 of my interview with CPAs Greg O'Brien and John Malone. In the next 10 years, I'm looking to put 100,000 Americans on the road to the 0% tax bracket. If you would like some help implementing a balanced, comprehensive approach to tax-free retirement that shields you from the impact of higher taxes down the road, head on over to davidmcknight.com and click on the Connect with an Advisor button. I'm happy to refer you to an advisor in the Power Zero network that has been trained, vetted, and qualified personally by me. If you're a financial professional and want to learn how to become a certified Power Zero advisor, head over to powerzero.com and opt into my free video series. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them into the comment section below. I'll respond to every single one of them personally. And don't forget to click like, subscribe, and the bell so you never miss a video. This is David McKnight. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.